When the judge asked for her by name, Christine's heart froze. The words sliced through the heavy air like a knife, and for an instant, Christine imagined that the floor under her chair would collapse. The tone was bland, in the measured, crisp voice of a court clerk. But to her the sound of the bell tolling, the beginning of the tempest, she could not escape. Her throat constricted at once. She swallowed convulsively, but it was like attempting to swallow pieces of glass. The courtroom itself was cold. Not the air, the vibe. It was cold in a way that made the skin on your arms tingle, even beneath the bulk of a thick sweater. Christine's palms, though, they were sweating, hot, as if her body had decided to turn against her at the worst moment. In the background, the muted, rhythmic click-click-click of cameras filled the air between breaths. The reporters had been waiting for this case for weeks. She could even hear the captions being typed out in their heads. Sister-wife faces custody battle, as if her whole life could be encapsulated in one lurid headline. From the back pew, a low buzz of murmurs churned, a combination of strangers and a few familiar faces Christine knew from the periphery of her existence. Everyone needed a slice of this. Everyone had something to say. None of them had the entire picture. She could feel her own heartbeat in her ears, pounding so hard it was almost covering up the bailiff's voice. Her fingers were curled around the lip of the table in front of her, wood slick from decades of other desperate hands doing the same. This was the day she'd feared for months. No, years. Before the official papers were filed, before the lawyers started circling, she dreaded this very moment. The custody hearing that would determine whether she'd still be able to see her youngest daughter without limits. Her baby, her light. The consideration caused a searing pain in her chest. That little girl was the sole person who still phoned just to hear the sound of Christine's voice. Or, she had. More recently, even those phone calls had shortened, become stilted. Christine's gaze wandered across the room. There he sat. Kody, the man she had loved, trusted, lived with. He was straight-backed, shoulders squared, in the stiff suit she had purchased for him years before for another court appearance. Seeing him in it now seemed a cruel irony. Next to him sat Robyn, the ever-loyal, ever-smiling wife, who seemed to have become the center of Kody's entire world. Her dark hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her expression calm, but Christine knew better. That calm was the kind that comes from knowing you're winning. They held hands, fingers entwined as if to announce to the entire courtroom, "We are the ideal couple. We are together. We are the ones who should win." Christine's stomach turned over in horror. This was more than about legal custody. This was about her integrity, about her truth, about the years she had invested in this family, years of sacrifice, compromise and love which had been erased the instant she'd opened her mouth to question Kody's regime. Her lawyer, a woman named Laura, edged slightly forward. "It's time," she whispered, the voice low but firm. Christine nodded once, couldn't say a word. The judge, a silver streak in his hair and unpolished stone eyes, looked over his notes before back at her. His eyes were piercing but not cruel. "Mrs. Brown, you may begin." Christine's legs were like soggy sand as she shoved her chair away from the table. She stood up slowly, the hem of her dress trailing over her knees. She felt like every eye in the room was upon her. Each step to the podium was like wading through water, slow and weighty but somehow also too rapid all at once. Laura trailed behind, a light touch on Christine's elbow as if to push her along, or perhaps to prevent her from falling. "Take a deep breath," Laura whispered when they stood at the stand. But Christine couldn't. The building held no air sufficient to fill her lungs. Each breath she made came short, stinging and unfulfilling, as if her body sensed this was a moment too perilous to succumb to. She stood there for a heartbeat, her hands grasping the edges of the podium with such force that her knuckles became white. Her wedding ring finger was naked now, but the skin still retained the faint imprint of the years she'd worn it. She could feel the ghost of that ring, like a phantom limb, and it caused her hands to hurt. Christine's gaze flitted fleetingly across the faces in the room once more. Reporters, strangers, and a handful of friends who had sat quietly in solidarity. Her eyes caught on one face specifically, that of her daughter's best friend's mother, 2 rows back, nodding imperceptibly. A reminder that not everyone had believed the lies. She swallowed hard a second time, this time managing to stand up a bit straighter. The podium was chilly against her fingers, anchoring her in the only way anything could at this point. Kody moved in his chair, tilting a little toward Robyn to whisper something. Christine saw the movement out of the corner of her eye. Robyn's lips curled up in a small smile, and Christine felt warmth flood into her cheeks. Not embarrassment, but the burn of being ridiculed in the exact moment she was struggling for her child. She pressed her lips together and fixed her gaze straight ahead at the judge. "Your Honor," she started, her tone soft but firm. "I stand here today because I love my daughter, more than I love my own ease, more than I love my pride. I stand here today because I believe she should have the right to have her mother in her life, without interference, manipulation, and fear." There was silence in the room now. Even the camera shutters had fallen silent. Christine stopped, her eyes burning, but she didn't blink. Not yet. She wouldn't give them the pleasure of witnessing her cry within the first 30 seconds. Behind her she felt Laura standing firm, a silent wall of strength. Across from her, Cody's jaw clenched, but his face stayed carefully controlled. Christine breathed again, shallow but deep enough to continue. "I know that there have been errors," she went on, "but they are my errors to claim, and I will not allow them to be manipulated into tools to remove my child from me." The judge leaned forward slightly, indicating for her to go on. Christine's fists gripped the podium again, and for the first time since her name had been announced, something solid inside her. Not hope, not yet, but determination, and she knew this was only the start. 6 months prior, Christine had still hoped the storm might be avoided. She had left the plural marriage with a sorrowful heart, but with hope too, the kind of tentative hope you keep in cupped hands, fearing that one misstep will dash it. She believed she and Kody could stay civil for the children's sake. She believed they could compromise, establish a visitation arrangement, and protect their youngest child from the venom of resentment. But she was mistaken. It began with a letter in her mailbox. A fat envelope, the sort you know is going to be bad news before you even open it. Her hands trembled as she ripped it open, the paper protesting like a warning whisper. Within were the words she feared most. Petition for full custody. Christine sat at her kitchen table, morning sunlight illuminating the paper, causing the black words to stand out more, to be darker, more final. She read the first sentence once, then again, hoping the meaning would shift on the fourth reading. It didn't. Kody wasn't requesting additional time with their daughter. He wasn't proposing an adjustment. He was filing her into court to remove the child altogether. The reasons enumerated were daggers. Unstable, unreliable, unfit. Phrases designed to annihilate her reputation in the court of law, and in the eyes of her own daughter. Christine's fingers shook as she picked up her phone. She called Kody at once, her voice strained, almost under control. "Kody, what is this?" she demanded. His tone was soothing, near smirking. "It's what's best for her. What's in her best interest." Christine's voice broke. "What's in her best interest is to have 2 parents. You know I've never—" "You up and moved away, Christine," he snapped. "You walked out on the family. You chose your own life over your children. I can't have her shuttled back and forth across states like this. It's not stable." Christine shut her eyes, the words cutting deeper with each syllable. "I left you, Kody. I didn't leave them, but it made no difference." His mind was set, and Christine had a feeling deep down that it wasn't just his mind playing tricks on him here. Because ever since she had walked away, Robyn had been the ghost in every conversation. Sweet-faced in public, tearful in front of the cameras, but in private Christine had witnessed the way she operated. The way she leaned forward to speak into Kody's ear at family meetings. The way she always seemed to know just what to say to influence him. Christine could almost hear the voice of Robyn in this court document, the faint, manipulative wording, the backhanded aspersions cushioned with concern. The worst part that shattered Christine's heart was not the lawsuit itself. It was the gradual transformation of her daughter. At first, the calls were normal, a little shorter than usual, but still full of giggles and "I miss you" at the end. Then came the excuses. "I can't talk right now, Mom. I'm busy." Then the silences between text replies grew longer. One day, Christine called and her daughter answered with a voice that sounded careful, guarded. Like every word was being measured. "Hey honey," said Christine, attempting to make her voice bright. "How was school?" "It was fine." Christine poised herself for the inevitable chat about friends and homework and teachers. It failed to materialize. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. There was a hesitation. Then in a tiny voice, "Robyn says you're happier without us." The words took Christine's breath away. "What? No, sweetie. That isn't so. I left because she told you you no longer wanted to be with the family." Christine's mouth dried. She wanted to yell, weep, drive back over that very second and envelop her daughter in her arms. But she knew her child was already enmeshed in a web of half-truths and poisonous whispers. She struggled to keep her voice steady. "I will always want to be your mom. Always, I will always love you." Her daughter did not respond. The call ended a minute later. That evening, Christine lay in bed, gazing at the ceiling, her pillow wet with tears. The betrayal stung enough to keep her up till morning. Not only Kody's betrayal. She had known that there would be some degree of resentment from him. But the fact that Robyn had moved into the role of truth-teller in her daughter's life, planting lies in her head, was almost too much to bear. She considered the early years, the way her daughter would rush into Robyn's arms, the way Christine had fostered the closeness, thinking it would keep the family together. She considered the smiles, the laughter, the Christmas mornings they had shared. And now those memories were being twisted against her. From then on, Christine understood the custody war would not be merely a matter of legal arguments and parenting calendars. It was a war for her daughter's heart and mind. And if she lost, it would not be a matter of less time. It would be the loss of the connection they once shared. The following day, Christine had her initial meeting with her lawyer. She put the papers on the table and attempted to steady her voice when describing everything. Laura, unruffled and systematic, made notes and nodded slowly. "This is going to be ugly," Laura cautioned. "They're going to attack your character, your history, even your parenting decisions. Are you ready for that?" Christine paused. She knew what it was like to be humiliated in public. Being on reality television made every personal failure larger than life. But this was different. This wasn't about defending herself in the court of public opinion. This was about fighting for her motherhood in a court of law. "I'm ready," Christine said, even though her voice was small. "Because if I don't fight now, I might lose her forever." The day of her testimony, Christine stood in the courthouse bathroom, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. Her face seemed foreign, pale, drawn, with dark circles etched deep below her eyes. She hardly knew her. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, casting a chill, almost sterile light on her face. She blotted the corner of her eye with a tissue, attempting to capture a tear before it smudged makeup. She couldn't appear weak in that courtroom, not in front of Kody, not in front of Robyn. Laura, her attorney, appeared in the doorway. "Time." Christine nodded, discarded the tissue in the trash, and rammed her shoulders back. But her hands were still shaking, her heart was still racing. And each step towards the heavy courtroom door was like moving towards an execution. As she walked in, everyone's gaze shifted to her. Shuffling papers and hushed tones were heard in the room. Kody rested at his table, reclining in his chair, as if he was the king of the castle. Robyn was next to him, her hand draped lightly on his arm. The two of them resembled the picture of perfect harmony. Christine sat down in the witness stand. The bailiff approached, administering the oath. Her voice trembled slightly on the word truth. A bitter irony, given all the ways in which it had been distorted in her favor over the past months. Laura rose. "Mrs. Brown," she began in a gentle voice, "why don't you begin by explaining to the court what this case is about to you?" Christine held the wooden frame of the stand, as if it alone was preventing her from disintegrating. She breathed in, shallow, trembling, but sufficient to force out words. "I'm here," she said slowly, "because I love my daughter. Because I think she deserves to have her mother in her life. Not as a visitor, not as a stranger, but as someone who tucks her into bed at night and cheers for her at soccer games." Her voice shook, but she continued. "I left my marriage because it was destroying me, and I believed leaving would save my children from the cold silences, the tension, the fights. I never could have imagined that it would be used against me to portray that I left them." She stopped, her eyes watering. "But I didn't leave her. I never will." Laura nodded encouragingly. "And Christine, can you tell the court what the last time you had seen your daughter was?" Christine's breath hitched. The picture flashed into her mind. Her daughter standing rigidly in the doorway, backpack over her shoulder, eyes skittering anywhere but into Christine's face. "Neither would she hug me," Christine breathed. "She'd rush into my arms. But that day, she just told me she had to leave. And then off she went." Her voice broke. I stood there watching her walk away. And I knew that she thought something that wasn't true. Something she'd been told, that I didn't care, that I'd moved on. But that's not. She clamped her lips together, trying to cut off the sob rising up in her throat. "That's not me." Christine shifted her gaze slightly in Kody's and Robyn's direction. "You know me," she whispered. "You know I've never been anything but a good mother. You know I'm not a threat to her." Kody avoided eye contact. Robyn's face remained impassive. Christine bristled, wiping at her cheek hastily. "My daughter is not a trophy. She's not a prize to be won playing some game of domination. She's a human being who should have the truth and the right to love both her parents without fear and without guilt." Laura took a step forward. "Christine, what would happen to you if this court ruled against you?" Christine took a slow breath, her voice near a whisper. "It would be losing her. Not just legally, but losing our bond. It would be her growing up believing lies about me. And once she does that, once the bond is broken," she shook her head, "it's nearly impossible to repair." She swallowed, her throat tight. "But I'm here because I think we can mend it. Because I think love can endure even this." The judge leaned forward a fraction, his face unreadable. "Mrs. Brown, do you have anything else you would like to say?" Christine faltered, the tears rising once more. And then, her voice shaking but firm enough to get through, she spoke. "I just want my daughter to understand. I never quit loving her. And I won't. No court, no distance, no deception. Anything won't make that any different." There was a long silence in the room. The kind that's dense, electric, almost painful. But out of the corner of her eye, Christine spotted something. Kody tilting in the direction of Robyn, murmuring something behind his hand. And then, that smirk. That very small nasty curl of the lips that had pursued her for months. For it was the match that set something in her ablaze. Christine stood a little straighter. She glared at them and declared, "You can try to steal her away from me, but I will never cease to defend her. Never." The bailiff ordered recess, and Christine climbed down from the stand, her legs trembling but her back straighter than it had been in months. She had broken, yes, but she had also shown them that she wasn't going to disappear. The courtroom hung heavier after Christine's testimony. The air was heavy with tension, like a storm cloud weighing down over everybody's heads. Even the reporters were silent, their pens scratching out in slower motion across their notepads. Christine sat in her table, fingers locked so tight in her lap that her knuckles ached. Her attorney Laura leaned forward. "You did good," she whispered. "Whatever goes down today, you spoke your truth." Christine wanted to hope that would be sufficient, but she knew the law wasn't always kind to the truth. It was kind to the argument that best sounded. And Kody had resources at his disposal. He had lawyers, power, and a well-honed image. Across the room, Kody sat upright, his posture unshakable. Robyn's hand rested lightly on his arm, the perfect picture of quiet support. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone sent the message. Christine had been dreading, "We've already won." The judge re-entered the room, robe flowing, expression unreadable. Everyone rose. The sound of chairs scraping against the floor filled the space. Christine's breath caught in her chest. "This is it." The judge sat, pushed his glasses higher up on his nose, and peered down at the documents before him. This case, he started, has been among the more involved custody cases this court has had in recent months. The feelings here are deep-seated. The history is extensive, and the stakes are monumental. Christine's heart thudded. She gripped her hands together. I have considered all the testimony, the evidence, and the recommendations of child services. The judge continued. It is the ruling of this court that primary custody will remain with the father. The words hit Christine like a physical blow. For a second, the room seemed to tilt. The edges of her vision blurred. The judge continued talking, but her ears were ringing too loudly to hear the initial sentences. She blinked hard, making herself concentrate. The mother, Christine Brown, shall be awarded visitation once per month, supervised, until such time as otherwise ordered by the court. Once a month, supervised. The words reverberated in her mind like an unkind chant. Her daughter, the little girl she had put to bed nearly every night for more than 10 years, would now be reduced to once a month. And then, too, someone would be observing, judging her, as though she were a threat. She forced the swallow down, refusing to cry. Not yet. She caught a glimpse of Robyn's lip curling upward, a faintest smile. Kody did not even glance at her. His eyes were locked on the judge, his face set in a mask of impassive triumph. Laura touched Christine's shoulder. We can appeal, she breathed. But the sound of her own voice was distant, muted as if Christine were drowning. The judge fumbled with his papers, then hesitated. However, he spoke out over the mist in Christine's mind. This court highly recommends that both parties seek family counseling. I think that there is love here, beneath hurt and anger. For your child's sake, I urge you to seek it out before it is too late. Christine's eyes jumped. Family counseling? It wasn't a win, not even close. But it was a fissure in the wall, a tiny crack that, if she pushed hard enough, could allow some light back into her life. The judge's gavel slammed down with a ringing crash. This hearing is adjourned. Chairs scraped once more. Folks stood, collected their belongings. The room exploded into the murmurs of people talking. Cameras popped. Christine stood slowly, her legs weighing heavily. She edged toward the door, but activity in the periphery of her vision caught her eye. Kody and Robyn were already halfway to the door, their heads bent together, speaking in hushed tones. Robyn looked back over her own shoulder. Not at Christine, but past her, as if she didn't exist. Something in Christine hardened. They may have won the day, but this wasn't an end. The whole courtroom was holding its breath, as the judge's gavel came down lightly on the table. Christine stared at the grain of the table in front of her, too fearful to look anyone in the eye. After considering the evidence, and both sides, the judge started, her tone even but heavy with decision. The court ruled that primary custody will go to Mr. Brown. Mrs. Brown will have visitation rights every other week, supervised. The words cut through Christine like a knife. For one instant, she believed she had heard wrongly. Her ears rang, and the room seemed to be tilting. Twice a month, under supervision? Her breath stalled in her throat. She had struggled so hard. She had spoken her truth, exposed every scar, every memory, every midnight tear. She had cried alone in the darkness of her hollow bed. And still, she was being informed that she wasn't enough. She glanced toward Kody, and saw the faintest smirk flicker at the corner of his mouth, before he masked it with a practiced look of solemnity. Robyn's hand squeezed his arm, and they shared a look that felt like victory. Christine's lawyer placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I'm so sorry, he whispered, but the words felt like dust in the wind, useless, gone before they could mean anything. The bailiff ordered her to be quiet, as Christine's hands shook. She struggled to stand, her legs heavy as if they were lead. The voice of the judge grew distant, as she gathered her belongings. Cameras clicked around her once more, this time catching the instant her cause was taken away from her. And as she stepped out, the corridor outside the courtroom appeared ridiculously long. Journalists yelled out her name, inquiring about her feelings, but she did not respond. She couldn't risk her voice shattering into a million pieces. The heavy double doors of the courthouse swung open, and a blast of cold wind struck her face. Outside, the sky was gray and low, the air filled with the threat of rain. She emerged into it, the world whirling by her as her own remained locked in place. Her phone vibrated in her palm, messages, missed calls. But she couldn't quite bring herself to glance. Instead, she remembered her daughter's smiling face, her giggles, the way she had flung herself into her arms the moment school let out. The sweetness of her small voice calling out, "I love you, Mommy," became now a memory that in fleeting snatched hours she could only hear. Christine stood on the courthouse steps, rain starting to fall. She closed her eyes and allowed the drops to flow over her like they could wash away the pain in her chest. Folks walked by, but she didn't even see them. And then, somewhere deep within her, she made a vow. They might accept the court's ruling. They might distort the narrative. They might cut her time short, but they might never steal her love, her struggle, or her hope. She would show up for every visit, every phone call, every piece of mail. She would never make her daughter feel abandoned. The rain pounded harder, dripping wet into her hair and clothing. Christine raised her face, eyes fixed ahead. The fight was lost, but the war to win her child's heart was far from over. With deliberate, measured steps, she descended the courthouse steps, and out into the drab afternoon, shattered, yet not defeated. For a mother's love never dies.